this is causing intergenerational like a disproportion and like being dragged below the poverty line.
Well, that's time, but a quick thing here is that was one, before the SAVE plan was implemented, and two, we'll talk later about how our government actually helps white people way more.
Are you guys seniors?
I'm sorry.
We're sophomores. Just respond to their case. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Okay. The first thing that they say is that currently student loan debt is high, but their evidence is from 2022. The SAVE plan was passed 2 months ago, and remember, is set to help 20 million people relieve their debt and make it affordable to pay off. That's why 4 million people have already enrolled in the program, and it's solving their impacts. But let's talk about this argument about small businesses specifically. Firstly, we would argue that while student loan debt might be a cause of not being able to start a small business, it's not the only cause. Indeed, So Goto 21 writes that business formation has declined because of labor supply constraints, and the aging of the US population. Skill levels of entrepreneurs has also increased. Furthermore, there's a lot of other things you need for building a small business, like expertise and a lot of money, not just the amount that you owe in student loan debt. Secondly, we would argue that empirically, the debt effect is negligible. Since student debt is a small expense relative to the cost of starting an entire business, Stockton 18 finds that 79% of small businesses with student loan debt last 5 or more years, compared to about 60% survival rate of small businesses as a whole. At the point where small businesses with student loans perform better than the standard mean, debt cannot have a significant impact on entrepreneurship. Prefer this over their evidence where people say that debt is a large barrier, because people have incentives to over-exaggerate these barriers student debt poses to them, when in reality it doesn't. Furthermore, again, it's not the only barrier. Third, we would argue that their argument has a very small impact. What State 15 finds is that the correlation only exists for the smallest of small businesses. The effect on the larger firm formation is not significant. Most of these firms that they're talking about don't want to get bigger, which is what's needed for their impact of like this huge increase in economic growth. Most of the small businesses just don't want to get bigger. Fourthly, we would argue you can turn their argument because of taxes. What Horsley 22 finds is that forgiving loans would transfer billions in debt to taxpayer and penalizes them, which is the majority of people who don't go to college. Mueller 22 quantifies that the average cost of the plan per taxpayer is about $2,500. Slavinsky 12 writes, that's important because Slavinsky 12 writes that a 1% increase in taxes leads to a 1% drop in entrepreneurship because people aren't able to finance their businesses if they're being taxed. This is important because it's the best link into small business creation because it affects all potential entrepreneurs because taxes affect all of them, while their argument inherently only affects the small amount of entrepreneurs that have student loan debt. This also applies to their argument about racial inequality because taxes affect all people of color, while not that many of them actually go to college. On the C2, firstly, we would argue that the SAVE plan is solving now. It specifically targets people in lower incomes who really need the forgiveness. That's why Caller 23, which postdates their evidence, finds that income inequality is on the decline now due to declines in household income at middle and top income brackets from 2021 to 2022. The distribution of income has become more equal, which is why Time 23 concludes that inequality is lessening across the economy. Secondly, we would argue that they're only treating the symptom of inequality while making the disease worse. What Olin 22 concludes is that college tuition is the systemic issue. Forgiveness amount is not the issue. If you forgive student loan debt, sure, maybe in the very short term you're going to reduce inequality, but per our argument about college tuition, when tuition increases, that makes inequality worse because it's the root cause of why people are in so much trouble because of student loan debt. The costs are just too high, college is unaffordable. Then, we would argue that the affirmative is actually regressive for a couple reasons. Firstly, Looney 22 writes that a third of all student debt is owned by the wealthiest 20%. Student loan forgiveness is regressive and is measured by income and wealth. This means that because when you go to college, you get a degree, which is an asset that can make you income in later life. And also, most of the people who go to college in the first place are already high income. When you forgive all student loan debt, you're only helping the rich without actually benefiting the poor. That's why the best way to solve is things like income-driven repayment programs like the SAVE plan that is happening right now that actually specifically help people like in lower incomes. But then, we would argue that debt forgiveness, again, only benefits the few who could afford college. Friedman 22 writes that more than 80% of Americans don't have student loans, and student loan forgiveness disproportionately benefits wealthier Americans. What this means is that when you're buying our arguments about harming the economy as a whole because of things like inflation, interest rates, welfare cuts, this affects everybody while they are only affecting the top 30%. Thank you, and please vote no.
Can I get, a minute? I'll start the timer. Sorry. We good?
Yep. Are you guys from like DC?
Yeah. Yes. Well, with Mine's McLean. We got us a tell me.
Sure. I know where that is.
They're
So you guys didn't get a hotel?
no.
Well, I live at a Fitz-Carlton Inn here at George Mason. So
You do?
No, it's awful.
Oh, I don't know why. That was the most gullible thing I've said in a while.
It's
We're just going to go talking about my case, and then we're just going to go first talking about my case, then moving on to their case. Anyone not ready? First, let's talk about the SAVE plan. Remember what the SAVE plan is. It is the most comprehensive income-driven repayment plan that we have seen yet. They don't make any new responses talking about the SAVE plan. What this means is that for the 4 million people that are already enrolled, they will see the benefits. You will see the benefits of their case, small businesses, and racial inequality being solved back by the SAVE program. What that means is that you don't have to affirm in order to have those impacts. You should negate, because if you affirm, you're going to cause this laundry list. You get to have the best of both worlds without any of the downsides. So let's start talking about some of them. First, let's talk about social spending. They make a few arguments, but they completely miss the mark. The argument is that in the future, the United States government is not going to have the money in order to expand our social security services. That means that over time, over 21.7 million children and adults are going to go into poverty because Social Security cannot be expanded. If you truly care about stopping poverty and anti-poverty measures, you would negate, because Social Security going away affects far more people than they talk about. They only talk about a small subset of the population that's already gone to college, but we're talking about 27 million people who are already in poverty and they might not have gone to college. So you vote there. The second place where you can vote is our argument talking about the economy. They say, talking about the economy. When we affirm, a lot of people have a lot more money to actually spend. That causes them to go out and spend it, which isn't good in the eyes of the US federal government. They make the response for you. That is going to make GDP go up. But that's exactly why the US federal government is going to raise interest rates in order to temper economic output to keep things stable. When interest rates are really bad, because it stops small businesses from being formed. Small businesses are formed from loans and things like that. When people have high interest rates on loans, they don't want to take out a loan in order to start a small business. That means that if you care about small businesses, if you care about economic growth, you negate there. But let's talk about their case. Firstly, they treat the symptom but not the disease. The disease is high college tuition. They make these silly arguments that colleges aren't for-profit firms and stuff like that. But think about it. How many times have colleges just jacked up their prices over time? They say that the DOJ is going to crack down. No, they don't. When have they ever done that? Make them give one example. That means that if you care about their case, their impacts, you vote for us to keep college tuition low. Even if you buy your entire case, you vote for us for those 3 reasons. But really quickly on their case. On small businesses, they don't respond to the fact that the effect is insignificant according to the Stockton evidence, because businesses that have both student loans and don't have student loans attached to them do similarly. That means that they're not actually solving for anything. But on racial inequality, they concede that the app is regressive. It helps the people in the top 30% because they need a degree and they've already gone to college, not the poor people. Thus we negate.
Judge, we urge you to affirm, as the negative has only suggested a small portion of people that Biden's plan will help. And when weighing these cases, you see the urgent need to affirm, as forgiveness affects 11 times the lives that their case does. Helping almost 50 million people out of crippling debt and poverty much outweighs the claimed help that Biden's plan will provide, which they still have provided no evidence as to how, why, and what exact ways and strategies this will be assisted. Not only does our plan prove and assure a way to actually help way more people, it also gives logical and proven actual benefits. Our arguments allow you to see a genuine, logical, and proven evidence as to why we must actually provide far more people a chance and another chance. They claim that this will cause heavy inflation, but if these very people that they claim are so struggling, and so much that they don't even have food, and rely so heavily on these programs that were in their contentions, they will genuinely go out and spend enough money to significantly increase and cause inflation. As you see, our evidence are based in our contentions are based in logic and fact, and will actually make a difference on way more lives. Thus, we urge you to affirm.
Great. Ready for Grand Cross? You guys can take the first question.
You get part time? I think we took 1 minute before, so we'll take another.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. You guys ready?
Yeah. Do you guys want the first question? Or?
You guys can go ahead. We did it last time. Thank you.
All right. So, what was your guys' response to the Stockton evidence that I discussed in summary? That among small businesses, there are small businesses with student debt, high levels of student debt, and businesses with no levels of student debt, but they still performed in similar ranges.
I'm sorry.
Like, what's your response to that piece of evidence?
That people with student debt and had small businesses also perform the same as people without student debt?
Like, in fact, they actually improved. They performed better. Like, going over the voters. The first issue in this round is that of poverty. They say that they're helping 50 million people out of poverty, but that's just not true. 44 million people have student loan debt, but those are not the people in poverty. In fact, they have not responded to the Horsley 22 evidence, the Friedman evidence, and so many other studies that we have provided that indicate that the people with student loan debt are predominantly people in the top 40% of earners. Why is that? It's because people who went to college in the first place already had money to begin with, firstly, and secondly, a college degree is an asset. It allows you to make more money in future life, so you're able to actually pay back your student loan debt. That's why just forgiving all this money for people who could have already paid these debts back isn't actually going to just harm people even more. Remember that the thing that actually lifts people out of poverty is welfare. Our actual looking at the empirics and history says that it's lifted 21.7 million people out of poverty. However, when you spend $1.6 trillion plus hundreds of billions of interest on forgiving student loan debt, then we don't get this money back and we're not able to spend it on expanding things like welfare programs, which are actually proven to get people out of poverty. This is the most important argument, way more important than theirs, because we're affecting every person in poverty and people all around the United States, while they're only affecting the 20% of the population that has student loan debts. The second issue is the broader economy. They have completely agreed with our argument by not giving any responses that when you affirm, we increase consumer spending because people have a bunch of extra money. That's a bad thing because it causes your companies to raise their prices, causing inflation. When the Fed sees inflation, they raise interest rates in an attempt to curb inflation, but that actually tempers economic output, slipping us into a recession that puts 100 million people into poverty. There's two reasons why this is more important than their argument. Firstly, inflation affects all low-income people because the prices of groceries are even higher, while their impacts, again, only affect 20%. Also, when interest rates rise, people can't start small businesses in the first place because in order to start a small business, you need to take out a loan. If the interest rates are higher, you can't do that. Lastly, on this argument about small business, it doesn't really matter because of all the comparative I just did, but the Stockton evidence has gone unresponded to and says that the ones with debt and without debt perform exactly the same because of the myriad of alternative causes and reasons why people can't start small businesses. It's so clean to vote next.